vape. I vape. I vape. And it gets your face like warmed up.
Super serious.
Where nothing fun or funny ever happens.
This is a super serious thing.
I don't even like dogs.
Super serious.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Super Serious Dog Podcast, where myself, Misha Bielitsky, and my co-host, Courtney Cuellar, get into the fun nitty-gritties of dog training. Super seriously, of course. Always.
Always. Nitty gritties are always serious. Super serious.
No, sometimes they're dumb.
What kind of nitty gritty shit are we getting into today, Misha?
The nitty shitty gritties that we're going to do today. We're going to talk about motivation, because motivation can be really obvious sometimes, and it can be a frustrating, tangled, chaotic mess. And there's a lot of different ways to motivate your dog, and there's a lot of different ways to think your dog is motivated, but really you're just being a dick to it. And it just looks like they're motivated to work for you, but really they're motivated to
Avoid you.
Or avoid some sort of consequence, or, that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about the spectrum of that.
Do you have the definition of motivation? Since
can get it real fast.
Yeah, let's get the actual technical definition of motivation.
God. Of course, Google is like, motivational quotes. That's what you want. No, barf.
Feel good.
Okay, so motivation is the reason or reasons one has for acting or behaving in a particular way. And then a similar entry is general desire or willingness of someone to do something.
Yeah, so we want our dogs to act in a certain way most of the time, you know. And they need to have a general desire to want to do that, to act in the way we want them to. So there has to be some sort of negotiation that happens between us.
And I think it stands to be said that we want our dogs to want to do things for us, right? Like, I want my husband to do the dishes because he wants to, not because I nagged him to do it 1,000 times, right?
Right.
Like, it's so much more pleasant that way. But also, generally speaking, I think everybody wants to be nice to their dog. They want their dog to be happy, right? And so if you can find a way to get your dog to want to do the things for you, and not even necessarily just because they're bribed, right? A lot of people get stuck on treats.
Yeah.
And stuff when they have a treat motivated dog. And you got to learn how to kind of get past that. So, so Courtney, for you, how do you use food? Let's start with food. How do you use food kind of like in the beginning stages of training a dog, the middle stages, and the end stages? And for this example, let's stick to a food motivated dog. So one of those dogs that will take a piece of kibble, you could give it a piece of grass and it would eat it because it came from you. You know what I mean?
So I'm glad you specified what kind of dog, because my answer was going to be, it depends on the kind of dog, because I'll use food in different ways for different temperaments of dog. So talking, your typical food motivated dog that just maybe has some pushy behaviors, I'm probably going to have that dog work for its food from my hand for engagement.
When you say work for the food, can you paint that picture a little bit more for people?
So that means instead of eating out of the bowl, it's eating out of my hand, and it's doing something I like right before it gets the food from me each time from my hand. So in this instance, starting off, what I want is the dog to want to interact with me. So any inkling that I get that the dog is choosing me over the environment will vary depending on where the dog's at. I will reward with food heavily.
Yep.
In the beginning, a lot. I joke that I'm a Pez dispenser in the beginning for a dog like that. But I mean, and depending on how quickly the dog gets that game, I'll move past it, and I'm not quite the free Pez dispenser anymore. And I start to up the challenge where I want other things now. Not only do I want your engagement, but I also want you to change your body position to where your butt is closer to the ground than when you're standing. Yeah. And sometimes I'll want you to change your body position to where your elbows are on the ground too. and I'll reward that.
So you said pretty quickly you'll transition out of that. So like if they're catching on quickly. So like on a, like average dog that's in this category of food motivated dogs, like how quickly would you say that happens?
So I'm probably doing it with at least one of their meals every day, or half of their food intake for the day, if not all of it. So probably a day or two.
Okay.
That's during like a board and train type scenario where I'm working with the dog 2 to 3 times a day, if not more. Cool. So it's getting several repetitions. And what I'm looking for to move to that next step, if you want to call it that, I don't have my training broken down to steps, but to move to that next stage, I'm looking for the engagement. I'm looking for that it's there, even when I pause in my rewards.
So like the dog looks at you, and if you don't immediately dispense food, it's still like, dude, hello.
This button's not working. Maybe I'll push it again. Why aren't you doing it? And without and this engagement exercise I'm talking about, I'm not saying anything to the dog. I'm fucking looking at the trees blowing in the wind. I'm doing whatever until the dog engages me, and then I kind of become activated, alive, and I dispense food.
So you're teaching the dog there that their motivation isn't that like, oh, you're going to give them stuff because they're trying and they're paying it. It's not as surface level as like, oh, look, you did a thing, right? Like when we train tricks, for instance, right? You teach sit. It's more like that dog doesn't exist to you until they look at you.
Yes.
So that really kind of unlocks a very specific chamber of their brain to go, I don't get everything for free from this lady ever.
But man, this lady can be a lot of fun when I pay attention to her.
Yes.
Because she starts moving and she starts handing out food. Yep. But when I go back off into La La Land and start smelling the breeze, she's really boring.
And usually you probably stop moving too, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because movement is also motivation, folks.
Yes.
Or can be motivational, I should say.
Right. So, if we talk about, not a food motivated dog, like a border collie or something like that, that's like using its brain far too much to take food right now. I will use movement as a reward. I'm going to be a static object. I think I'm using that word, right? I'm going to be, I'm a static object in the environment tethered to you until you choose to engage with me. And the very fucking second you choose to engage with me, I'm alive. And we're moving, and I'm engaging back with you. I'm giving you feedback that I like what you're doing. So that feedback can also be motivation, that movement and interaction that we're getting.
Because I don't know if you guys have noticed, but most dogs, when they're outside on a walkie or at a park, they don't want to sit still. They want to go all over. Have you ever just followed your dog at the park? They will literally traverse the entire thing like 10 times over in the amount of time you would have just done one loop, following their nose and stuff like that. I actually helped Ailes, actually. I've talked about her before. We did a lesson the other day because Murphy started pulling a bunch, and now she's big and strong, so it matters. She's still a puppy, but she's not tiny anymore. And that's literally all we did. It was like, we're just gonna stop and we're gonna wait. And as soon as she looks at you and stops tugging and all that, we're going to pretend to take half a step, because actually moving was too much for her. She was just so used to, cool, as soon as you go, we go. And honestly, within like 30 minutes, she was walking nicely on leash. She had to get reminded every now and then, like the dump truck would go by, and then she'd be like, I forgot everything I just learned. Right. Yeah. And ever since then, their walks have been significantly better. I thought we were going to have to put like tools on the dog. I thought we were going to need like a harness or a prong collar or something, probably a prong collar, honestly, the way she was acting and pulling and being dumb. But we'd start with like a slip lead or something like that anyways. But yeah, like movement can be very, very powerful because the dog wants to go. And so if you can align those principles, like, I know you want to go too, but you're the patient human who's in control of how and when and what speed we go. And our dogs also want to walk faster than us. So you can also use that.
Their natural gait is faster than our natural gait.
By several miles per hour. We are slow as shit.
Yes.
Where are my fast walkers out there? Because I'm a fast walker, and don't you just hate being stuck behind a group of slow ass people? Fucking sucks.
Like, I will speed walk around them.
But sometimes you can't.
I know.
Sometimes you can't.
It's the worst.
narrow. Yeah, it's so dumb.
Remember
So
crowds?
annoying. Yeah. What's that like? That's so weird.
I don't know.
But
I heard a bunch of people cheering off in the distance at a park the other day, and I got like seriously alarmed that there might be something like bad happening to those people because like a stadium full of people cheering sounds pretty alarming when you haven't heard it in over a year. It was
that's really funny. That is crazy.
Anyway, sorry.
So let's go back to the food motivated dog example. So we're kind of in the like middle stages where now you're about to go into the middle stage where like you're looking for more contact, more desire to be attentive to you, usually in the form of eye contact or standing at your side. And then, and by that point, maybe they've sat a couple times and been heavily rewarded for that. So you're shaping sits and downs, whatever the dog's more comfortable with, which I think that right there is also super key. Courtney and I have both worked at places where you will sit, you will down, you need these skills because they are functional and useful. But then you get those clients that are like, well, if I ask my dog to sit, I don't really care if they lay down. Like, I just want them to not be a dick and jumping on people. Right. So by
you
doing
just want
this,
them stationary.
Yes. So by doing this, you find what the dog naturally defaults to. And you get to see how comfortable they are. So therein, you're already kind of going with the grain as opposed to against the grain. Because if the dog prefers downs, you're just going to ask it to down.
Right. So during that stage, I'm typically not saying sit or down. I'm just shaping the behavior. I'm doing body language and kind of luring-ish with the food just to see what they offer me. Right. And when they get it right by either putting their butt down or putting their elbows down, it's heavily rewarded and they're like, oh, that's a good position. But yeah, if I lure-ish a sit and then immediately after I give the reward, the dog lays down on its own, it's like, oh, okay, that dog prefers to lay down, right? Yeah. And since, it's a chill, adult motivated, food motivated dog, like it can lay down when I stop. That's totally fine. I don't care. We just want it to be stationary and not jump on people, right? So yeah, I'm a big supporter of that now. So one of the things that people always get stuck on is like the dog's doing really well. You're getting it around more distractions and you've started to say the words like sit down, etc. Whatever the command may be. And they're doing really, really good. But everybody's like, well, but I have to always have treats on me. Right. So what do you say to that? So then I say you're in the next stage. Right. To where, yes, it is advisable for you to have treats on you, but whether the dog gets it or not is a gamble. And now the dog does need to get it sometimes for it to be worth the gamble. Because if you have the treat and the dog never gets it and they're used to getting it and now all of a sudden they're not getting paid at all, well, that's a pretty shitty pay decrease, Yeah. So especially if it's very abrupt. Like if I started getting paid half my salary, I'd be pissed. Right. For no reason. Like if I didn't know why. Right. So you have to randomize it. You have to make it fun. You have to gauge how into it is the dog. Am I about to lose them? Could I give like a jackpot reward now and keep them engaged more because they're like getting the answer right? They feel good. And then you just continue to raise those standards. And so like, let's say you're rewarding 1 in 5. And then you start to reward 1 in 10, then 1 in 20. And eventually you're not carrying the treats. But I'm not just giving the food reward, right? I'm also giving verbal praise. I'm also giving more freedom, more movement. There are liberties being earned with this good behavior the dog is now displaying that we've shaped. So the reward becomes life and not so much the food. The dog's still getting its daily intake just in other ways now, whether that be through food puzzles or just out of its bowl or whatever, just depending on the dog. But that's how you move away from it. But the timetable on that is not black and white. And and there are times when you should go back and increase the odds, right? So I mean that's what training sessions are for, right? Practice your sits and downs and reward your dog every time for it. Yep. Randomly in the middle of the week. Randomize what the situation looks like surrounding those events too, right? Because if you always just do it in your kitchen,
And that's when you go back to training and whatever. Like, don't get me wrong. I train her in my house all the time, but like,
Right. That's
will
good. I don't want to
also-
discourage you from that, but
Right.
also
There's still,
switch it up.
still value, but that's not going to necessarily translate to distractions. Right. And if you want your dog to continue to be good around distractions, you have to continue to go find those distractions, seek them out, and practice around them. So,
Right.
like, take your dog, if you usually take your dog to Home Depot, right? Or like you want to do that. So, at first, you're rewarding heavily for being out there and listening and being a good boy or girl. And then you start to kind of phase that out, right? Like, so like Courtney said, 1 in 3 times, 1 in 5 times, 1 in 20 times for that one behavior. And this can be really hard to keep track of.
Right.
Because
So don't think that I have a running tally in my head. It's not an exact science. I mean, don't get me wrong. Okay, I'm going to piss off all the science people. There is a science to it. But when you're in, it's called flow state with the dog, you're not counting those things. At least I'm not. I imagine there are some trainers out there who
and
do
if you
have
were
numbers.
if you were too clinical, the dog would also pick up on that because they're really good at pattern recognition.
Yeah.
So if you do literally 1 every 5 times, they're going to go
the third
cool.
one every time. Like they're like, okay,
Yeah.
so this time I'm gonna do
Right.
it. Yeah.
So you have to get kind of just kind of good with accepting, like, I don't want to say like errors, but like not being precise and perfect, but being very, very attentive to yourself when you start sliding back into the habit. Because if you think about it, if up until this point, let's say it's been months where you've just been giving the dog treats for every good action, well, then you're in that habit now and you have to start learning to break it and be more attentive to it. Right. So, but yeah, if you want to take your dog to Home Depot, at first you're going to use a ton of treats, but then you're going to wean it off. But then like your dog's just going to be good for a while without them. They're going to be like, dude, this is what I do. This is amazing. I love doing this. And then one day you'll notice like, they were kind of barky today, or they like really pulled me every time we saw another dog, because maybe you've gotten the habit of letting them go say hi to other dogs at Home Depot. Right. So then the next time you go, or maybe even in that moment, like if you have treats in your car or on you or whatever, you just haven't been using them, then you kind of go back to going, okay, the skill is fading in my dog. So I need to make sure that I essentially adjust and realize that like skills are going to change. They're going to be perishable. It's fine. Like they will go away. Just bring them back online. It's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
It's fine.
So I think that's pretty good kind of overall for like food motivated dogs. So I want to talk about the fun stuff.
Okay.
So Courtney and I, this is fun for us because these are the dogs that make us go, fuck, what do you want? What do you need? And getting to experiment in other ways of motivating a dog. Don't get me wrong. Every once in a while, I'm like, oh, thank God, a food motivated dog. This is going to be so easy. But the challenge is what's fun, right? So Courtney mentioned a couple of other ways to motivate dogs, like affection, praise, freedom. Part of that freedom could be smelling stuff, right? Could be walking a little bit faster, going at the dog's pace, not your own pace. Climbing shit can be really fun and motivating. So basically, sometimes dogs, and if you're one of those people, God bless you, who has a dog who is very aloof, or just kind of naturally bred to be very independent, you've probably found that food doesn't always motivate them. Sometimes you get really lucky because those dogs might be more affectionate or whatever. I once trained a Samoyed, which if you don't know what that is, Google it. It's really cute and adorable.
It's so cute.
They're so fluffy.
Yeah.
And he was a puppy. So like he was fairly easy to train in that like there was a lot of things that motivated him. Play, food, his favorite stuffy, running around like an idiot with Auntie Misha, But with him, like his motivation wasn't static. So just because treats were working last session does not mean treats were going to work this session. In fact, it was pretty like cyclical almost, to where like if I wanted to, I could just plan out my day with treats for this session, affection and love and, massages for this session, and toys for this session. And I could probably just bounce through it. I didn't, because I was worried that he would get too smart and like predict it
Right.
too much, but I literally had to change it up every single time. And sometimes in that session, I would still throw in a little bit of food, and he'd take a few pieces because he'd just be like, "Yeah, we're playing," and I like food
good,
too.
feeling great. I like doing stuff.
Right, but he would only
food.
take like treats like twice or three times in that session, so it would still be very heavily focused on other stuff. So, what are some dogs like that you can think of that were maybe more difficult to motivate, or you had to do something else for a while before they broke through into being comfortable enough to take other forms of?
Do you remember Emily?
Yes.
That Pyrenees?
The Pyrenees? Yes.
Okay, so that dog, for our listeners, Emily was a 2-year-old Pyrenees mix, which a Pyrenees is a naturally very aloof breed.
Mm-hmm.
And she lived a really bad life for those 2 years, and was afraid of everything. She would often take like a week break from eating. So there was no food motivation. She was terrified of toys. So there was zero toy anything. She hated being touched, not hated like gonna bite you because I hate it. Hated like, does that hurt? Is it gonna hurt type? Like just didn't know what it was, I think. So she lived with me for a couple months while I helped her get less afraid of the world. And I mean, existence was her motivation. She wanted to survive every scary, I mean, she didn't think she was going to survive any scary situation, but she wanted to. So just the fact that time was passing was all the motivation I had to work with in the beginning with her. So it was like, we get out of the car and we just stand here and we just exist.
And we don't die.
We don't die. The wind blows and the tree moves and we don't die. And we can even move away from the tree. If it's a bit much, we can move calmly away from the tree. We're not going to bolt away from the tree, but we are going to walk away from the tree together. And it was tiny little stuff like that and little tiny victories here and there because I got her to step over something that was like 3 inches tall,
Yeah. And y'all, I knew this dog at APA before Courtney got her. Like it was just pure coincidence that she ended up with Courtney. But yeah, this dog like wanted nothing to do with humans at all. She was in the shelter for like not even a week. And they're like, yeah, we need to find a foster for her because there's 300 barking dogs and people constantly going by it was too much. Like that poor dog was going to freaking explode. So she ended up in like foster and then eventually ended up in Courtney's care because somebody was awesome enough to want to give her a better life and provide, a bridge.
Those people had the people that brought her to me. They had her for 3 months and had the first time they had gotten her outside was to bring her to me because they couldn't get her to go in the backyard. She pooped in the house and she's not a small dog.
No.
But like she just pooped. They basically just gave her like an area of their house and she like they couldn't get her out of it until they drug her to the car. And into the office to meet me where she
crazy.
Where she pooped herself.
I remember one time I was hanging out at your place and like you were like, dude, Misha, check this out. And you had your like legs crossed, you're sitting in a chair or something like that. And Emily had gotten to a point where she was choosing to lay next to you, right? And she'd been doing that for some time at this point. And then you go, watch this, Misha. And you just start like rubbing your heel into her butt. And she kind of like shifted kind of into it. And like, you're like, this is what she likes now. This is how we touch her.
Yeah.
Like besides like, leashing her up and whatever, she had gotten used to that. But like, as far as like affectionate petting, that's where y'all were at. And I think that's really important to note because like a lot of times we get a dog because we want something from it, right? We want to fill some hole in our heart or, maybe we just really want to give this animal a better life than it had or whatever, right? Whatever you had in mind. A lot of times we project a lot of ourselves onto our dogs and like our needs. Like I need affection, but I just broke up with this shitty person. So I'm going to dump it into my dog.
Right.
Right. But like, that is not usually conducive to anything. There's a lot of dogs that will gladly accept it and whatever. And like, be willing to receive it and also enjoy it. But like Emily was not one of those dogs. And I think it's really important for us as humans to kind of step outside of ourselves and think about like, does my dog actually enjoy this? Like if you pet your dog and they're like, give me more, and like they're nudging your hand and stuff like that, like, yeah, your dog likes it, clearly, right? My dog Rocky will come over and like I'll start scratching like his rump, like right at the base of his tail, and he just like dances into it. And then if I stop, he like pushes his butt into my hand even more. Like you can tell if they're enjoying it, right?
And a big thing I want to add there is like, don't take it personally if your dog doesn't like it or want it right now or in this situation or in certain situations or whatever, because it's not that it doesn't like you. It's that it doesn't like being touched right now. Like I think any human can relate to that. You wouldn't want someone just like hanging on you all the time, right?
So annoying.
So yeah, like don't be that to your dog, because then your praise and your touch for celebration and your touch for motivation won't be there.
It won't mean a thing.
It won't mean anything. So, a way I look at motivation is also that there has to be some scarcity for it to be motivating.
Yes.
Right. So a dog that is free fed and has food, but its bowl is full of food at all times of the day is very unlikely to be food motivated.
And if it can come up to you at any point in time and get something that it wants from you, you are now just its butler. Right. You're just its butler. And if you're perfectly content and your dog is content living that life, sure, it's fine. But many dogs aren't, unfortunately. Right. Even ones that seem happy, usually there are severe deficiencies in the relationship between you and them. And you don't really realize it until it's way too late. And then it's just hard. And then it feels heartbreaking to have to break these habits and that kind of stuff, right? Because you're like, but I always do this with my dog. Right. This is what I do.
Right.
But it's not about you. It's about your relationship together. It's about getting the dog to want to pay attention to you, right? It's kind of like you said, like you don't want anybody who's super clingy. If you're dating, right? Let's say you're going out on dates with people. You're not texting them constantly. And if they're texting you constantly, you're probably like, okay, like cool it a little bit. Like you may have good rapport, but still if someone's like literally all day, every day, what you doing? What you doing? What you doing? What you doing? Oh my fucking God.
And just going to throw this as a service announcement for if you are that kind of person in dating and you are that kind of person with your dog, and the nicest way possible, you need to look at that. In yourself. You know what I mean? We all have things we're working on in ourselves. My list is very long. I know Misha's is as well. And so like, it's okay to be like, oh shit, that's me. That's me. I do that. I text constantly. I'm always, where are you at? What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah,
Dude,
blah.
no wonder nobody texts me back.
Right. So like, and oh my gosh, I'm also like that with my dog. I'm constantly fawning over them. Every time I'm around them, I'm touching them. They're touching me. We're always attached and touching. And then they just don't listen. And it's like, well,
because they don't have to.
They don't have to.
They don't have to. They get whatever they need when they need it, when they want it. So if you're out on a walkie and you're asking them to do stuff and they're not listening, why would they? Everything else is so much more interesting than the toy that they get to play with all day, every day.
Right.
When they want.
Right.
Scarcity is such a weird thing too, because obviously too much scarcity is a bad thing as well.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, you can't never so there's plenty of people in this world that don't take their dogs for walks, right? Like, and that makes me a little bit sad. But at the same time, if you're at least like taking them on adventures, going to Home Depot, on hikes, you take them on like camping and beach trips and stuff like that. You're doing other forms of fulfillment, and you're not just a dog that literally lives in the house, eats, shits, and pisses, and, maybe spend some time outside in the backyard. Like, that's sad. That's a sad existence. That's a dog that is not going to be very motivated to do much for you, because it's going to be so overstimulated by the time that you go outside that there's just too much, right? Like we've all seen that. I mean, you, Courtney, you've seen this shit 1,000 times.
Millions of times, I feel like at this point.
And, sometimes just letting that dog sniff the grass and just use its nose for the first time in forever. Not that it's not smelling things in the house, but like,
it's the same things.
You know how like you come back from like a trip or something and you walk into your house and you're like, oh, that's what my house smells like. Because you're so used to it. You don't smell what it smells like every day until you leave for a little while and come back and you kind of take it all in. Same with like colognes and perfumes, right? Like after a while, you're like, I can't fucking smell it anymore. Am I wearing anything, Courtney?
But yeah, like if your dog never gets to go out the front door except to go in the car to go to the vet, like the motivation for it to get out the front door is much, much higher.
True.
So if you don't want the dog to be so motivated to get out the front door, then you need to go out the front door sometimes.
Yeah.
With a different purpose other than, oh my God, I never break free. So, yeah. I mean, it's most issues that people have are motivation issues in some way, that the dog is motivated to do something they don't want them to do.
Mm-hmm. You know what's really cool? I'll drop this last little fun nugget that I kind of forgot is totally a great way to motivate an unmotivated dog. But essentially, I saw this post on Facebook about a dog who was suddenly reluctant to go in his kennel. Like he used to be kennel trained, but I think he like flew on an airline. And then after that was just never the same again because they were in cargo hold. And I'm sure that's really stressful, especially if there's like other dogs that are losing their shit in there. Like that just can't be fun, right? So somebody's suggestion was to close the kennel door, but put food in there. And just let the dog get frustrated from not getting the food. Yeah. So utilizing that frustration to build motivation to go inside. And it was one of those things where I was like, oh my God, yes. Like I forgot that's a thing. I forgot you can turn the tables and use manipulation. Mm-hmm. You can manipulate the situation to formulate it. Like, and it's freaking great because like at first it's not going to do anything. The first day it's not going to work.
Yeah, the dog's be like, whatever. I don't want that. I'm going to go get my food out of the bowl or whatever somewhere else.
But you have to stay strong. And what they would do is they would usually do like 3/4 or like half the food and then put the rest of it close the kennel door, put like 3/4 half, wait for the dog to like notice and be like, come on, man, like, can you just like open this door, please? Or whatever, pawing at it, whatever they want, whatever signal the dog is interested in, open it, let them eat it. But obviously they didn't get all their food. So they're still going to be a little bit hungry. Immediately add more, shut the door with the dog on the outside of the kennel and let that kind of build and simmer some more. So like, yes, they're getting fed.
Right.
They're not going to die, but they're going to want more.
Yeah.
Right. Or like specifically putting like, let's say the dog loves Kongs or a specific bone later in the day, throwing
their
one of those in there
or something.
Yep. Keeping it in there. Yeah. It's like the cookie jar, right? Yeah. You're like, I'm not supposed to go in the cookie jar, but I really want to. Right. So motivation can be a super powerful thing. And it's really fun when you have to start when you get to start thinking about it outside of the box and not in kind of like the cookie cutter way. And the faster that you can kind of start training your brain to think like that, the easier it will be for you guys to solve problems as they arise. Because it's not going to be about, well, but last time we did steps 1, 2, and 3, you're going to be much more able to get inside your dog's head and look at what's motivating them in the moment and then adapt accordingly. Mm-hmm. Just far more powerful.
Yep.
Far, far more powerful.
Yep.
Yeah. This is a good topic. This is fun. I feel like we could definitely keep going on and on about it. So if you guys want to hear more, check out our Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/super serious dog podcast, we got tons more awesome content on there. Lots more deep dives and continuations of interviews, all kinds of fun stuff. And they're longer episodes too. So if you like listening to us, go check it out. Also, if you have questions or anything like that, or topic suggestions, or just like, I want to know this about dog training. And
I still really want to do a consultation for a person on our show.
Yes. That would be fun. I totally forgot about that. Okay. Yeah. If you want to do a free consultation with us and kind of spill the beans, obviously you have to be comfortable being recorded and this being posted.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. That's part of being on a podcast.
But yeah, it could be a really cool experience, and it could be really, really helpful for other people to kind of get a sense of what a dog training consultation might be like, or how it's different from maybe ones that they've done in the past or whatever. So if you're interested, email us at superseriousdogpodcast@gmail.com. And we appreciate y'all. Thank y'all for listening.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Super serious.